today we're talking about how, everything from businesses to government are using AI to improve productivity and improve capabilities, basically do things faster, easier, better, cheaper. Today, my guest is Rishi Khan. I'll tell you more about him in a second, so stay tuned.
Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we feature top entrepreneurs, business leaders, and thought leaders and ask them how they built key relationships to get where they are today. Now, let's get started with the show.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show, and you're in for a treat today because one of the most hot topics we're talking about today and people are focused on is AI and its impact on business. And of course, if you've listened before, I've talked to other guests about this as well. And some of our guests on previous shows range from, CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs from Netflix to Kinko's, YPO, EO, Grubhub, Activation Blizzard. Check out the archives. You can check out some of those episodes. And of course, this episode brought to you by our company, Rise 25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasting and content marketing. And you can look and learn about everything we do at rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. And first, quick shout out to past guest Ab DeWeese, who's the founder of Good Automation, who recommended today's guest. Some of our best guests come from past guest recommendations. And my guest today is Rishi Khan. He's the Chief Technology Officer at ACOS Solutions. I'll ask him what that means, what it stands for in a second. It's funny. And also President and Chief Technology Officer at Extreme Scale Solutions as well. And he has a wealth of experience in the world of AI. Really interesting guy. He's got a PhD in computational biology. I don't even know what that is. So hopefully he will school me on what exactly that is. And we connected through AB and through the World of EO Entrepreneurs Organization, which we're both members of. And so, Rishi, it's such a pleasure to have you here today. And first of all, ACOS, what does that stand for? I love that one.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people out there who are hucking different AI things, and they don't know what they're talking about. So when I came up with ACOS with my friend Ab, we started this business together. We're like, what do we want to call it? We're like, well, we don't know what to call it, but there's all these people out there saying they understand AI, but we're one of the few that actually know our stuff. So we thought we'll call it ACOS, AKOS, actually knows our stuff. And that's where the name came from.
And you guys are not like new to the world of AI. You guys have actually been immersed in it, doing it for a long time. So I think that's a perfectly fitting name for you. And I love to ask people about stuff they did as a kid or in high school or college. And you built a website called Wizards at Work back in 1999. What was that?
Yeah, actually, so I actually found two investors and a friend of mine and myself. We basically started a website building company. So we built websites for other companies. This was back in 1999 when, the internet was just coming around and people were really hot to websites. So yeah, so as any good entrepreneurial college kid would do, learn some HTML, build some websites.
And do you recall what you used? Did you use Dreamweaver? Did you use
it was a combination of things. We did use Dreamweaver a little bit, but a lot of it actually was just raw HTML at the time. So what we did is we built little templates for the nav bar and for the top and the bottom, and then you kind of just like copy and paste them together. So Dreamweaver came around a little bit later, but Dreamweaver is actually better for like chopping up an image and putting it on the website. It's not so great for actually doing all the internal JavaScript and stuff like that, which was just coming out around that time.
Yeah. And you had another business too, which was, and I don't know how you got into this, shipping cars from the US into Russia. You found there were a lot of new money Russians that wanted US cars. This sounds like not an easy business to start. How'd you get started with that?
So I had a friend who was a car dealer at Mannheim, and he would get a bunch of cars, and he's like, I'm trying to sell these cars. One of my friends, who actually we started the Wizards at Work together with, knew a bunch of Russians who wanted cars but couldn't get them because they couldn't get them through Germany because of export reasons and things like that. And so what we were doing initially was just sending pictures. We would literally just take pictures and then just mail them over to the other side. And they would look at those pictures and be like, hey, I really like this car. Can I get that car? And then we moved on to actually building a website that they could see all the pictures of the cars, all of the information about the cars. They could choose a car, and then they could watch it go from Mannheim up to Elizabethtown, New Jersey, on a truck, and then it would go to Kotka, Finland, over boat, and then after many different bribes, it would end up in Moscow, and then they would get their car. So there was probably a spread of about $10,000 between what we could buy it for and what they would pay for it, and then about $5,000 in costs, including transportation and smoothing the skids along the way.
It sounds like something
$5,000 per car.
It sounds like a business that would at some point go horribly awry and be like a movie, basically. But how did you manage to run that business? And you're actually, I think, full-time in school at the time.
Yeah. I believe I was in my graduate school at that time. It was around like 2001, 2002. We did it. It was basically a side business. We did it for about a year. We probably shipped, I don't know, 20 cars. And then, we decided that, we wanted to move on to other things.
Yeah. Yeah. So at the time, you're studying computational biology at the time?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So what is computational biology?
So computational biology so normal biology, at least at that time, was I'm going to study some gene and I'm going to look at how this gene affects, in certain conditions. So like I have a rat and I scare him and I look at whether this gene was on or off when that happened. And what was just coming around the bend was the ability to measure all the genes. So there was this technology called microarrays where you could measure everything all at once. And so computational biology kind of came out. It's also called bioinformatics, kind of came out of that technology from the ability to measure everything. Biologists didn't know what to do with all of that data. So we moved from a hypothesis-driven science of, I hypothesize gene 5 is the gene of interest, let me go study that, to what's called a discovery science genre, where I'm just going to measure everything and see what changes. And that brings up a whole bunch of problematic statistical things. And you have to almost rethink the philosophy of science to a certain degree, because you end up finding patterns that aren't there. If you look at everything, you're going to find patterns. And how do you verify those patterns?
So in the world of sciences, this is not like you're studying physics or chemistry or something that's been around for a long time. It sounds like this is like kind of a whole new field of study that you're kind of on the cutting edge of studying. What was it like, going through a doctorate program on something that was so new, so cutting edge?
Well, I mean, the whole point of a PhD, right, is to do something that nobody else did and cut your own space out of that. It was a lot easier for me because there was a lot of things that people didn't do in this area because the technology was just coming out. Kind of like how AI is now, right? Like AI is really burgeoning, and there's so many avenues of research that are available to people right now. Whereas if you go into physics, I mean, like if you're looking at say high energy physics, there's only a few things that you can really look at. Computational biology was a whole new, or still is to a large extent, a whole new world where you can measure all the genes, all the proteins, all the metabolites, and try to build mechanistic mathematical models of how all of that works.
And did you see yourself eventually going like into academia? Did you see yourself becoming an entrepreneur and blazing your own path at this point when you're going through your program?
Not really. So I honestly just glom on to interesting stuff. Like my entire life has been about like, what's cool? Let me work on that, and I'll figure out what that means later. So at the time when I was doing that, it was really cool stuff. And then for my postdoc, I realized that the technology to measure the genes wasn't very good. And I came up with a new technology to do that better. And so my postdoc was actually a startup called Perfect Expression, where we tried to make that technology work. It turns out that I was unable to do that, not necessarily because of the technology, more around just funding and having the right team. But the basic idea was, instead of trying to measure a group of RNAs coming over to a specific area, on a slide, what we were doing is we were putting RNAs on individual beads and then measuring those beads on a high density CCD camera. And so our big bet was, and this was back when your camera had, like, if you had a 1 megapixel camera, you were awesome, right? Like, remember those days? So like,
Yeah.
our big bet was that megapixels are going to become cheap. And it turns out that that's what happened. And the technology that we developed is kind of around the basis of what everybody does nowadays, to do DNA sequencing. So we were on the right track, didn't have the right team. And then I moved on to do other things that I thought were cool and interesting. So it's really been just jumping from one field to another and finding synthesis over all of these different areas.
And what was the origin of, so Extreme Scale Solutions is your company that you started in 2014. How did that come about?
So, well, I just back one step. After my postdoc, I joined a company called ET International, and we built high performance computing software for mostly the NSA, but we also did some DOE stuff. And at some point in time, I got a little frustrated with the direction that company was going, and that's when I started my own company. Extreme Scale Solutions. So extreme scale is a term that the Department of Energy uses. They were getting in trouble with Congress. Congress is like, we paid for gigascale, we paid for terascale, we paid for petascale. Why do we need this exascale thing? Like, why do we want to do that? Like, who's going to use it? Why are we putting all this money into it? And so the DOE reframed it as, well, what we're going to do is not exascale, we're doing extreme scale. And what that means is exascale at the data center. But then in a department, that could be petascale, like in a room, like in a department, like in a DoD facility. And then that would also be terascale. I'm mixing things up. So exascale.
I wouldn't know the difference, honestly.
Exapeta, yeah. Tera at like the individual, like Humvee, like on the back of a Humvee. And then, for a specific person, like a soldier, terascale. So the issue is basically power. So how do you power exascale at 50 megawatts? Or actually, I think they were aiming for 20 megawatts at the time, right? How do we get exascale?
We're talking about power or energy for...
Yeah, like power plant. Like, how do you have enough power to power this thing and get exascale? And then at the departmental level, I want to go from megawatt to kilowatt. And then at the soldier level, I want to go from kilowatt to watt. Right. So I want to be able to measure, I want to be able to have something on a little lithium ion battery on a soldier. Mm-hmm. And I want it to be, 1,000 times more powerful than what we have today. So that's why they called it extreme scale, because it was extreme at all of these levels.
So that sounds like a very deliberate decision on your part to name it what you did. Was the goal to get contracts through the agencies then? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And then additionally, since I'm doing large scale data analytics in the commercial world, the word extreme scale sounds like, oh, wow, that's like got to be big. So that was the kind of the ambiance that I was trying to portray.
And are you at this point, is the goal to go into helping with AI, or did that come later?
So AI has been part of, so looking at the government technology, AI has been around since maybe the early 1990s, right? Mm-hmm. And it really got its big push in around 2004, 2005, when they figured out how to do this thing called CUDA. I don't know if you remember when GPUs first came in to play. So the problem with AI was twofold in the 90s. One, not enough data, not enough compute, right? So you couldn't do anything because there wasn't enough data. And then even if you had all the data, you couldn't compute on it. And some really smart computer scientists figured out we could use these GPUs that everyone's using to play Doom 3 and do computations really fast. And then NVIDIA then took that and said, okay, we're going to build something around this. And that's what enabled AI from a compute perspective. And I would say the first stuff was around 2005. And then like around 2008, it just kind of ballooned since then. So like most people are hearing about AI in 2022, right? But
Yeah.
really around 2008 was the first real interesting AI things happening. So NIST put out a challenge. They said, look, we're just going to take 60,000 handwritten numbers from 0 through 9. If you can build an AI that can recognize these, then maybe you have something. And if you can't, don't talk to us. So that was the first real challenge. And that was solved around the 2008, 2009 timeframe. And then in 2012, ImageNet came out and we had really good image classification. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled. In 2017 or 2018, Google came up with transformers, which is the basis of all the LLMs you see today. And really what happened with ChatGPT in 2022 is they did make advances in the technology underlying, but really the big thing is that everybody was building a autocorrect bot, essentially, guess the next word. And ChatGPT, what they did is they tuned it to be a instruction bot, like to take instruction and answer questions. And once they did that, and then they converted it into a chat bot, all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, now I can use this. Me, average.
Sure, yeah. That's what my reaction was. That's what so many people's reaction was when it came out, and why it, ballooned, just became so popular in such a short period of time. So then for you was, when did you have a ChatGPT moment where you're like, oh my God, or were you just kind of like, yeah, that was the next thing I was expecting? What was it? What was your reaction like?
Yeah, so I did have a ChatGPT moment, but that was more like in 2020. Where I was like, wow, this LLM technology can actually answer real questions and put data together. And I was using it then, right? This was GPT-2 in 2020.
Okay. So no one was, like, few people were paying attention at that point, but you had checked it out at that point. Okay.
Exactly. But you would have to basically download this model in Python, put it on a computer, convert all of your words into tokens, put this in, and then get a token out, and then oh, that's the next word, and then do it again and again.
Which no one was doing, right? Or you and not a lot of others. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, OpenAI was something that I was aware of because I've been a fan of Tesla for a long time. So I was kind of vaguely aware of it because I knew that Elon Musk was involved in it, but that was the extent of my knowledge personally.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and they were looking at like, how do we make AI? It's funny because they're very closed right now, but how do we make AI open and keep it safe? That was the original, backing of AI.
That was the original purpose. It was a nonprofit, and they've taken a lot of pushback from that. I think that Elon Musk was an early funder, put in $100 million into OpenAI. I think that he's in active litigation with OpenAI. I can't remember where that stands right now, but what were your thoughts on that? Do you think that we need a nonprofit of some sort, a regulating body of some sort to monitor and save us from AI, or do you think? What are your thoughts?
It's a problem because, I mean, if you think of it as like a cyber weapon, right? It's not like nuclear information where you have to have the nuclear fissile material. You have to have a lot of physics and knowledge of how to build centrifuges and how to create
to build a nuclear bomb or something.
Right, that's
like
a lot of work. Whereas with an LLM, it's, well, I just go here, download this, follow these instructions, and it's software. So I could literally copy it across the internet in a matter of seconds. And so what you see today as GPT-4 being one of the most powerful LLMs out there with all these safeguards on it, right? Like, oh, I'm not going to answer that question about how to make a plasma bomb. Like, it's trivial to now take that and get around. I would say it's closer to GPT-3 power, just open source, right? And now with a Llama 3 that just came out with that, I mean, I haven't even looked into that much, but they're looking at a 440 billion parameter one. They have the 71 out right now. It's pretty straightforward to use it for whatever you want. So I don't know how you do non-proliferation with LLMs. Like, the cat's out of the bag, and it's software. It's
Yeah.
kind of like, remember back in the 1990s, they're like, oh my gosh, this RSA encryption stuff is really, really powerful, and we can't get it in the hands of bad people because then they could just encrypt their communications and we won't be able to listen to them.
Mm.
Well, and they had export regulations and all this stuff, and it all didn't work because it's software.
Yeah. So let's talk about kind of present day, the types of challenges that businesses are
Yeah.
facing or looking at using AI with. I know when we had spoken previously that you said that an example might be a company that has operations issues, needs them solved, and comes to you
Right.
asking how they can use AI for that. So let's talk about that application, some ways in which you're seeing companies use it.
Sure, it could be operations issues in a number of ways. So it's either I want to reduce costs or I want to increase throughput, right? So they solve the same problem essentially, but basically having humans do every single step of this thing is very slow and prone to error. And
Hmm.
so for example, let's just say I am a healthcare broker, right? So I get the premium information from all of the TPAs, the third party administrators. I know, like, each person, how much is their premium, what plan they're on, and so on. All that then needs to be entered into a computer. And then that information needs to be synced up with the healthcare provider and then brought back. Every time there's a claim, the claims have to be adjudicated and so on. And 99% of that is human data entry and moving, bits and pieces back between humans. Whereas if you could take those forms and OCR them, optical character recognition, process that data, and maybe have a human check that everything is okay,
Hmm.
and you could process 1,000 times more data, right? It's
Hmm.
that easy. So anytime you have a process where it's like I have to take in data in a random format from an outside source, convert it into something, and then push it out to something, is an opportunity for automation.
Mm. So, like, for example, a law firm that
Mhm.
is triaging different types of calls that are coming in, people calling in,
Right.
about traffic violations or something like that, like figuring out which types of solutions you can help them with, or the law firm can help them with, which might be a
Exactly.
type of application.
Yeah, you could almost think of it like a very personable phone tree, right? Like
Hmm.
you call up and you're like, "Hey, my problem is I got a red light ticket on this address here. I don't think I went through the red light, but I need to contest it," right? Like you don't want to push 15 buttons. You want that information to be processed. You want their information tree to be processed and say like, okay, I need to ask this question. And then
Yeah.
the answer. So I'm like, for example, I think a lot of customers are okay with interfacing with an AI and not a human if it can solve their problem, right?
Yeah.
They
I
hit
think
the
at
phone
some
tree
point,
when they're going in a circle, right?
yeah, I mean, at some point, we're going to have zero tolerance for the old way of doing things, which was a ridiculous phone tree of
Right,
like, press one for this, two for this, three for this, five. By the time you get to 20, it's like, you haven't listed my my option yet,
right,
and people get frustrated with those types of solutions, whether it's, through a phone, or whether it's in a website, or whether it's
right.
typing into a chat bot or whatever. And then that'll put pressure on the businesses that haven't caught up to make those changes for themselves.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's where I see a lot of the operational efficiency can happen, and it's very tricky in nonprofits or government because they are very, very sensitive to job creation, right? So if they can have a guy whose job is to move the papers from this side of the room to this side of the room, and they don't need that anymore, they're reluctant to necessarily get rid of that person. So the way that we have to pitch to government agencies is it's not about getting rid of people. You're going to keep those people and they're going to do higher cognitive things, and you're going to impact more of your citizenry, right? You're
Mm.
going to you're going to turn around, instead of turning around 4 permits per day and in a duration of 4 months, you're going to turn around 50 permits per day and it's going to take 2 weeks.
Yeah. And I mean, government is, yeah, I worked in government for many years. I mean, it's constantly underfunded. So the idea of being able to do more with less, that's got to
Exactly.
resonate with them.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some other ways in which you see AI being applicable for businesses that want to use it today, especially as they kind of dip their toes in the water?
So one of the problems that we have right now is like we can't look at all the situations. So like let's just say you're a logistics company, right? You want to be able to ask a lot of what ifs and you want to optimize for certain things, right? You want to be able to say, I want to take my orders from my customers, match them to my inventory on demand, and make sure that my supply chain has all of those pieces so that I can ship it out, as fast as possible. This is like the Amazon problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And AI, the AI you're thinking about can't do this. This is not generative AI. This is called predictive AI. So predictive AI, the goal is to understand patterns in inputs and outputs and predict where things are going to go and what you're going to need. So predictive AI is really useful in a lot of scenarios where you're not interested in creativity or just general understanding of text. You're interested in predicting what would happen. So a case that I deal with is with oil companies. They're interested in knowing where to inject carbon dioxide underground in order to push out oil or to capture it. They're interested in to know where should I drill, right? For example. And so the data that they have is what's called seismic data. They either in a boat or with dynamite, they make a loud noise and they listen to that noise come back up through the earth to understand what the earth looks like. And from that, you can model what's underground and you can ask thousands of what if conditions. What if I drill here? What if I put this much pressure here? How will this look? And then you can find the most likely scenarios and then focus on those. Right now, a lot of what they do is guesswork, right? I shouldn't say it's guesswork. Geologists look at it and they squint and say, that looks like a salt formation here. This looks like a rift. Over here we have this fault. Therefore usually oil is like here, right? As opposed to running thousands of simulations, almost instantly to say, here are the top 5 areas where we should be looking.
Now, I'm not sure if this is the same scenario that you and I had chatted about previously, but there was a scenario with sequestering carbon from the atmosphere. Oil companies wanted to sequester it underground because then it calcifies and becomes limestone. Is that the same scenario, or is this a different application?
Yeah, there's 2 scenarios. One scenario is, okay, the governments are asking me to sequester carbon dioxide for greenhouse gas reasons. And what am I going to do with it? Well, the best thing to do with it is to put it in the ground and put it in a reservoir. If it stays there long enough, the carbon dioxide reacts with calcium and becomes calcium carbonate, which is chalk, right? Limestone. But you have to find these reservoirs where this can stay. So you have to look at the way that the underground strata are formed and find caps, right? Like granite caps where you can put the carbon dioxide under here, right? You don't want something that looks like this because it'll just like go wherever, right? So that's an example. We can run simulations on the order of 2 seconds that normally take like a week to run. Wow. And we can run thousands of those. And then based on those, you can say, now I want to run a detailed simulation of over here. So the way I look at it is like AI can almost be like if you were to squint and look everywhere, and then you can use detailed physics models to, okay, I like that area. Let me do a detailed physics model to test whether the AI gave me a good solution. Do the same thing in bio, right? In bio, they're very interested in taking chemical formulas and saying, AI, make me 1,000 putative targets for ApoE gene, the ApoE protein for Alzheimer's, right? And it'll do that. And then the top 5 they'll go and test. right? Because
Mm.
it might not be right, but it'll be the probability of having a great answer is very high. So it's really good for triage situations where it's okay to be wrong.
Another one I know you talked about is in the world of back to business
Yeah.
with prospecting. You could have an AI that basically was able to research people a lot faster than you would be able to manually. So like go out and get their link, gather some information on
Yeah.
someone, like gather their LinkedIn, their website, and then gather all that information together,
Yeah.
read it very quickly, and then spit back out to the business. Well, here are 5 things that you might want to talk to this person about, or here's how you should talk to them about. Do you want to talk about that one also?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually working on a SaaS product that does this. So the idea is you'll go out, say I am I'm just trying to think, like, say I make signs, let's say, right?
Sure.
I'm a sign company. I go out to a prospect, I get their LinkedIn page, I go to their Twitter, to their Instagram, to their Facebook. I get all of that information together. So I'm a human doing this, right? I read
Yeah.
their Facebook, their Twitter, their Instagram. I'm looking at what kind of logos they have, how I can build signage for them, do things better than they do already. But I can actually have AI pull all that information in and say, give me 5 different things that I can sell, you, John.
Mm-hmm.
And for each one of those things, give me a lead-in question to ask John to get to that answer. So I already know what I want to sell you, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to ask you something so that you can discover that you need whatever I'm trying to sell you, right? And I'll look at that. And so when we've done this in the past, there'll be 5 things, and 2 of them will be garbage. 2 of them will be, oh, not so bad. And 1 of them will be, wow, this is a really great idea. And then you might
Mm.
take those 3 and use them. Like I said, it's not perfect. There's still some, some, you know, uh, like
Pieces that needs to be hammered out.
yeah, I don't know if I would call them hallucinations. I would just basically call them like, just misunderstandings, right?
Yeah.
Like it didn't correctly get the right grasp of what's going on here. And so that's how I like to use AI is if I can get 10 ideas and 4 of them are great, then that's wonderful, right? And if
Yeah.
6 of them are garbage, well, that's okay. Do I want AI, doing my surgery right now? Not really, right? Like if it messes up, that's tragic, right? If I mess up
Yeah.
a sales idea, it's no big deal.
Right. You mentioned hallucinations. That's kind of a
Yeah.
big issue with AIs right now, is that a lot of times they'll spit out information that sounds convincing. It's like your friend that tells you something and they sound so convincing, but they're dead wrong about something, even though they
Yeah.
sound convincing. What's the solution for that? Is it just time? Eventually these AIs will get more accurate, or is there a solution for, when it spits out information that's just dead wrong?
So, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. So let's just say I have my employee handbook and I want people to be able to ask questions about it, and the AI will tell me answers. There's things I can do to force the AI to make sure that it didn't make it up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, if it's just general knowledge, like, who killed Abraham Lincoln, and you don't actually give it anything for real, then it's very hard to contain it, because the problem is that it is trying to come up with statistically meaningful words that go together, and it sounds good, right? And so that's the problem. So how do you solve it in the employee handbook case? You actually have 2 AIs. So the first AI is pulling information from the handbook, processing it, and then spitting out, this is the answer. And then you have a second AI that says, is this the answer? And show me where it is in this document, right? And so you could try to put them into one AI, but typically you want to have them as 2. One is the generator of the information, and the second one is the judge.
Mm.
And the judge is in charge of not coming up with anything. He's taking a statement that was made and verifying that it's true or not true and giving evidence for it. The first person is in charge of coming up with the idea. So I take my handbook, I do something called RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. I take all the bits of the handbook and pass it to the AI and say, hey, what do you think? How many days off does Joe have? Right.
Yeah.
And it's going to come up with an answer. And who knows if that's right or not. But then the second AI's job is it true that Joe has 3 weeks of vacation? And if so, where in the handbook does it say that?
Yeah, that seems like that will be the solution in the short term that will give us a higher degree of confidence that the information that we're getting is accurate.
Right.
And then a long term, once these AIs become more accurate, then maybe that becomes less necessary over time. Hopefully.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, but if you're training, I mean, you almost want to have two different things that you're training, right? One is I want to be able to train for coming up with a solution, and another one is I want to verify that a solution is correct.
Yeah. I know we're a little short on time, so
Sure.
we'll wrap up pretty soon. But any other areas of AI that you're particularly excited about right now, or that you kind of have your eye on, that you see a lot of potential, for businesses to apply this kind of revolutionary technology?
Yeah, there's a few. So one that's really interesting is I really think video creation is going to become more and more usable. Right now, you get these 5-second clips, and it's really hard. And Sora is showing some promise there, but we'll see exactly where that goes.
And
I think
that's the
could really
OpenAI video creation tool,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
that's right. Also, the other thing I wanted to mention is I think that really the tools that are going to be useful are going to be AI put into existing tools. So if you remember, we started with Stable Diffusion, there's DALL-E and Midjourney, but really, if you go to Adobe's Firefly, like it's a whole different level of usefulness than DALL-E, right? DALL-E is like, draw me a picture of a pig flying. Oh, I don't like that picture. That sucks. Let me try again, right? Whereas in Photoshop, I can go in and I can select this area and say, do this with this and not with this. I can build layers. I mean, it's a whole different level of capability. I think the same thing is going to happen with video. It's going to go into InMotion, and it's going to go into, After Effects and things like that, not, Sora, right?
Yeah.
That's where I think things are going to go. The other thing I think is becoming really powerful is smaller AIs. So you got your big, Geminis and GPT-4s and all of that, which are great, but they're slow and they're expensive. And what a lot of companies are doing is taking those AIs to train smaller AIs like 7 billion Llama 3, parameter AIs on a specific field. So like, I want you to be an expert in my HR. And that's it. Like, I don't want you to answer questions about high energy physics. I just need you to answer questions about my HR. So what you can do is you can make a much smaller parameter AI that operates orders of magnitude faster and cheaper, but doesn't do everything.
Yeah, it'll be a lot more useful from a business perspective. Like, I just want to ask a question about our HR. I don't need you to, solve quantum mechanics for me or anything like that. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's, and I don't know if you've watched it, but I struggle with ChatGPT sometimes. I'm like, for example, I'm like, write me a function that takes a linked list and reverses it because I need to do such and such, right? And I'm just watching it on the screen, like, oh my God.
Oh yeah, it's spelling out every last detail. So I was like, I don't need all this stuff.
So whereas if you use something like Llama 8 billion on a standard graphics card, you can get like 200, 300 tokens per second, right? Like, it's truly moving at the speed of thought. It's putting out answers faster than I can read them, which is good enough for me because now I can interoperate at what I believe is real time, right?
Yeah. Especially if you're like in a conversation with someone and you want to have access to that information in real time. Right. Yeah, it will be a lot more effective. Like, to say to go back to the example we were using earlier about like a sales opportunity. You
Right.
need to be able to generate that information really quickly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. Rishi, this has been really interesting. I'd love to, I'd love to wrap up just with my gratitude question, which is I'm a big fan of gratitude, especially expressing gratitude to those who've helped you along the way in your journey. And, is there anyone in particular that you'd want to shout out and thank? Any peers, contemporaries, mentors?
Yeah. So I was in a group called CEO Think Tank, and there was a guy named Chris Burkhart who runs Placers in Delaware. It's a like a outsourcing and recruitment firm. He has helped me innumerable times. I've come to him with my problems. And then I'd also like to thank Ami Kassar from EO Philly. He got me. He's talked to me 100 times about funding things, and I've never actually done business with him. But he always answers my questions. But he brought me into EO, and then I'd also like to thank Ab and Joe. I've learned a lot from Ab Deweese, who has a test and measurement company back in Dallas, and then Joe Frost, who's in Omaha, who does content marketing. Really, really cool guys.
Yeah, all great people. Rishi, where can people go to learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to acossolutions.ai. Or you can on the WhatsApp channels in EO. I do a lot of that, and also maybe you can leave my LinkedIn in the description.
Sure, will do. All right, Rishi, thanks so much.
All right, thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.